Emily, are you all right? Where's the baby?
Vanessa took my phone and turned off the lights. We are waiting in the dark.
Don't worry, the security cameras recorded everything.
When I opened my front door on New Year's Eve, I found my wife lying on the kitchen floor, 3 days after surgery, and our 6-month-old daughter shivering beneath a thin towel. The refrigerator was empty, and 20 minutes later, my security cameras showed me exactly who had done it. Hello. My name is Daniel Mercer, and until that night, I believed the worst thing that could happen to a family was bad luck. I was wrong. Sometimes the greatest danger is not a stranger outside your home. Sometimes it is a person who has a key, knows your schedule, and smiles while promising to protect the people you love. I worked as a regional safety inspector for a construction company in Ohio. The job paid well, but it kept me on the road more than I liked. My wife, Emily, never complained. She was 31, patient, practical, and much stronger than people assumed. 6 months earlier, she had given birth to our daughter, Sophie. From the first night we brought Sophie home, Emily seemed to know what every tiny cry meant. 3 days before New Year's Eve, Emily had emergency surgery to remove her appendix. The doctors caught the infection early, but they warned her not to lift anything heavier than 10 pounds, climb stairs unnecessarily, or stay alone during the first week. I was in Indianapolis when she called me from the hospital. I immediately told my supervisor I was going home. Before I could book a flight, Emily's older sister, Vanessa, called. Vanessa lived 15 minutes from us with her husband, Rick. She sounded offended that I would even worry. "Daniel, she's my sister," she said. "Canceling your inspection will hurt your career. I'll stay at your house, cook for Emily, take care of Sophie, and make sure the heat stays up. You can come home after the final site review on January 2nd. Emily told me Vanessa had already arrived at the hospital with flowers. She said I should finish the job because we needed the money. Our insurance had a high deductible, and the surgery bill would not be small. I agreed, but only after Vanessa promised to send me updates morning and night. For the first day, she did. She sent a picture of soup on our kitchen counter. She texted that Emily had taken her medication. She even sent a photograph of Sophie sleeping in her crib. On December 30th, the updates became shorter. Everything's fine. Emily's asleep. Baby is good. That evening, I called Emily. Vanessa answered her phone and whispered that Emily was resting. When I asked to speak to her anyway, Vanessa said the pain medicine had made her confused. Something in her voice bothered me. It was too smooth, like she had practiced the explanation before answering. At 6 the next morning, my site supervisor told me the final inspection had been canceled because of an incoming ice storm. I could have stayed at the hotel and waited 2 more days. Instead, I packed my bag and began the 4-hour drive home. I did not tell anyone I was coming. Snow blew across the highway in white sheets. Cars crawled behind salt trucks, and the radio warned people to avoid unnecessary travel. Every few miles, I called Emily. Vanessa did not answer either. At 40:47 that afternoon, I turned onto our street. Most houses glowed with holiday lights. Smoke rose from chimneys. Families were already preparing for midnight. Our house was dark. Vanessa's SUV was gone. I parked in the driveway and noticed something else. There was no clear patch of melted snow around the furnace vent. In winter, warm exhaust usually kept the bricks near that vent damp. My stomach tightened. The front door was locked. The moment I stepped inside, cold air hit my face. "Emily," I called. There was no answer. Then I heard Sophie crying. It was not her usual hungry cry. It was thin and exhausted. I dropped my bag and ran toward the kitchen. Emily was on the floor beside the island, wearing a sweater over her hospital gown. One arm was wrapped around her stomach. Her face was pale, and her lips had almost no color. Sophie lay beside her in a laundry basket lined with a bath towel. For one terrifying second, I thought Emily was unconscious. Then her eyes opened. "Daniel," she whispered. "Are you real?" I knelt beside her. Her skin was cold. I took off my coat and wrapped it around her, then lifted Sophie against my chest. Our daughter wore only a cotton onesie and socks. "Where is Vanessa?" I asked. Emily's eyes filled with tea. "She left yesterday." Those 4 words changed my life. I called emergency services. While we waited, I found 2 blankets and covered Emily. I turned on the gas fireplace, but the central heat remained dead. The thermostat showed 51 degrees. In the refrigerator, I found half a bottle of water, mustard, and a jar of pickles. The formula container on the counter was empty. Emily said she had mixed the last scoop with extra water that morning because she was afraid Sophie would have nothing at all. I felt anger rise in me, hot enough to make my hands shake, but anger had to wait. My wife and child needed me calm. The paramedics arrived 7 minutes later. They checked Emily's surgical wound and found signs of dehydration. Her blood pressure was dangerously low. Sophie's temperature was below normal, though she was still alert. As they carried Emily to the ambulance, she gripped my sleeve. "Vanessa took my phone," she said. "She said you told her to." I stared at her. "I never told her that." Emily began to cry. "Then who have I been talking to?" At the hospital, doctors treated Emily for dehydration and a reopened incision caused by crawling across the floor to reach Sophie. Our daughter slowly warmed beneath heated blankets. The pediatrician told me another night in that house could have become a tragedy. I sat between their beds and tried to understand what Emily had meant. She explained that after leaving the hospital, Vanessa had placed Emily's phone on the dresser across the room. Whenever it rang, Vanessa answered it. Later, she began bringing Emily printed screenshots of messages that appeared to come from me. One message said I was angry about the medical bills. Another said I needed quiet and did not want Emily calling during the inspection. A third said I had authorized Vanessa to control the household money until I returned. Emily knew the messages sounded cruel, but she assumed I was stressed. She tried to get to her phone, but Vanessa moved it again. When Emily demanded it back, Vanessa told her the surgeon had warned against screen time because it could worsen the effects of medication. It was a ridiculous lie. But pain, exhaustion, and medication can make even ridiculous lies sound possible. On December 30th, Vanessa told Emily she was going to the grocery store. She took Emily's phone, my spare house key, and the diaper bag. She never returned. That evening, the furnace stopped. Emily could not reach the basement stairs safely, and the thermostat did nothing. She used every blanket she could find for Sophie. By morning, there was no food or formula left. Emily had tried knocking on a window when she saw a neighbor outside, but the man did not hear her through the storm. I asked whether Vanessa had taken anything else. Emily hesitated. "She kept asking about your office," she said. "She wanted to know where you stored the insurance documents and the deed." Our house had 4 exterior security cameras and 2 indoor cameras. I had installed them after several garage break-ins in the neighborhood. Vanessa knew about the cameras, but she apparently believed they only streamed live video. She did not know I had upgraded the system to save encrypted recordings online. At 8:15 that night, while fireworks began exploding over the city, I opened the camera application on my laptop. The first strange clip was from December 29th at 11:08 in the morning. Vanessa stood in my home office with Rick. He was supposed to be working that day, and no one had told me he had entered my house. Rick carried a small black case. He sat at my desk, connected a device to my computer, and began copying files. Vanessa searched through the cabinet behind him. The camera had no audio, but I did not need it to understand what I was seeing. At 11:19, Vanessa found our property folder. She removed the deed, insurance policy, Emily's passport, Sophie's birth certificate, and several bank statements. She held each page beneath a portable scanner before returning it. At 11:42, Rick walked toward the basement. The basement camera showed him kneeling beside the furnace. He removed the front panel, turned a valve, and slipped a small component into his pocket. He had not merely switched off our heat. He had disabled it. My first impulse was to drive straight to Vanessa's house. Instead, I downloaded every clip and copied it to 3 separate locations. Then I called the police. An officer named Maria Alvarez met me in the hospital waiting room. She listened without interrupting. When I showed her the footage, her expression changed. "Do not contact them," she said. "And do not warn them that you have this." She asked whether Rick had access to our bank accounts. "No," I said. Then I remembered the files he had copied from my computer. I opened our banking app. The password had been changed. My heart started pounding again. I called the bank's emergency fraud department. After verifying my identity, the representative told me someone had attempted to transfer $48,000 from our home equity line of credit that afternoon. The transaction was pending because the receiving account was new. I froze the account. Then the representative told me there had been a second request, an online application for a much larger loan secured against our house. The application included copies of our deed, identity documents, and electronic signatures from both Emily and me. Neither signature was real. Officer Alvarez asked me if Vanessa and Rick were in financial trouble. I knew Rick's contracting business had lost 2 major jobs, but Vanessa always claimed they were doing well. She wore expensive clothes, drove a new SUV, and posted photographs from restaurants every weekend. Then I remembered something that had seemed harmless at Christmas dinner. Vanessa had asked how much equity we had in our house. I had laughed and told her it was none of her business. Rick had not laughed. Officer Alvarez took my statement and gave me a report number. She said detectives would seek records from the bank and the online lender. The furnace footage could support charges for property damage and reckless endangerment. The forged loan documents could turn the case into serious financial fraud. But the worst surprise came just after midnight. Emily's phone suddenly connected to our shared cloud account. Its location appeared on my laptop. It was not at Vanessa's house. It was inside a downtown hotel where a private New Year's Eve party was being held. And a new photograph had just been uploaded from the phone. In it, Vanessa was smiling beside Rick beneath a gold balloon arch. In her hand was a glass of champagne. On her wrist was Emily's diamond bracelet, a gift from my late mother. Behind them stood a sign that read, ANEWBGNING. They had left my recovering wife and baby to freeze so they could celebrate the life they planned to buy with our money. Emily and Sophie remained in the hospital overnight. I stayed with them until sunrise, but I did not sleep. At 7 in the morning, Vanessa finally called me. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was bright and casual. "Happy New Year. How is Indianapolis?" For a moment, I could not speak. I was looking directly at Emily, who heard the question from her hospital bed. "Cold," I said. It was not exactly a lie. Vanessa told me Emily and Sophie were sleeping peacefully. She said she had just made breakfast and planned to spend the day doing laundry. She did not know I had already stood inside my frozen house. She did not know the bank had stopped the transfer. She did not know a police officer had watched Rick disable the furnace. I asked her to put Emily on the phone. "She's in the shower," Vanessa replied immediately. Emily stared at me, pale and silent beneath her blanket. "Then have her call me later," I said. Before ending the call, Vanessa asked an important question. "You're still coming home on January 2nd, right?" "That's the plan." Her relief was unmistakable. Officer Alvarez had warned me not to confront them, so I forwarded the recording of the call to her. Then I contacted a lawyer named Sarah Kim, who had helped my company with a previous fraud case. Sarah told me to document everything: medical reports, food receipts, repair costs, bank records, messages. She also advised me to change every password from a clean device and place fraud alerts on our credit files. By noon, the scheme became clearer. The online lender called to confirm that the loan application had been canceled. The employee explained that the requested loan was for $280,000. The money was supposed to be sent to a newly created company called Mercer Home Renovation Group. I had never heard of it. Corporate records showed the company had been registered 1 week earlier. Its mailing address belonged to a commercial mailbox. The contact number, however, was Rick's. They had used my last name to make the company look connected to me. The plan was simple and cruel. Copy our documents, forge our signatures, borrow against our home, move the first smaller amount before the larger loan was reviewed. If questions arose, they could claim Emily and I had created the company ourselves. But why disable the furnace? At first, I thought Rick had done it to force Emily out of the house so they could search without interruption. Then I reviewed more footage. The answer was worse. At 12:06 on December 30th, Vanessa stood in the kitchen speaking on Emily's phone. The indoor camera captured audio. "She won't go anywhere," Vanessa said. "She can barely stand." Rick's voice came through the speaker, faint but clear. "Then turn the heat down. She'll call an ambulance eventually." Vanessa replied, "Daniel watches the thermostat from his phone." Rick said, "Not if the system looks broken." Then Vanessa laughed. That laugh was the moment she stopped being family to me. They expected Emily to call for help after they left. But Vanessa had taken her phone, perhaps by accident at first, or perhaps because she was afraid Emily would contact me and expose the forged messages. They had created a dangerous situation and then walked away from it. Later footage showed Vanessa packing for diapers, frozen meals, jewelry, and a sealed envelope containing emergency cash. She carried everything to her SUV. It was not neglect caused by panic. It was theft performed one bag at a time. The detectives obtained an emergency warrant for the hotel room registered to Rick. By then, Vanessa and Rick had checked out, but hotel staff recovered documents from a trash bin, practice copies of my signature, loan calculations, and a handwritten list of items from our house. One line on that list made me feel sick: insurance after fire. The words were followed by a question mark, but their meaning was impossible to ignore. When a furnace has been deliberately damaged during freezing weather, pipes can burst. Electrical heaters can overload circuits. A desperate person might use an oven for warmth. Any of those events could lead to enormous property damage or death. I no longer believed the cold house was merely a way to remove Emily. It may have been the first stage of something even worse. On January 2nd, I repaired the furnace and installed new locks. Emily and Sophie went to stay with my parents after leaving the hospital. I placed the cameras into evidence mode so nobody could delete or alter the recordings. At 5:30 that evening, Vanessa's SUV pulled into our driveway. She believed I was still an hour away. She entered with the stolen spare key, followed by Rick. Both carried empty suitcases. I watched from a police vehicle parked 2 houses away. They moved quickly through the home, opening drawers and cabinets. Rick went directly to my office. Vanessa entered our bedroom and began filling a suitcase with jewelry and documents. Then Rick noticed the locks had been changed on my filing cabinet. He called someone and said, "The papers are gone." He knows. They ran for the front door. 2 patrol cars blocked the driveway before they reached their SUV. I stepped out of Officer Alvarez's vehicle as police ordered them to show their hands. Vanessa saw me and stopped moving. Her face seemed to collapse. "Daniel," she said, "this is a misunderstanding." I looked at the woman who had abandoned her sister and niece in a freezing house. "No," I answered. "The misunderstanding was believing you loved them." Rick tried to run through the backyard. He slipped on the ice before reaching the gate. The police found Emily's phone in Vanessa's purse, along with my mother's bracelet and 2 of Sophie's unopened formula cans. In Rick's suitcase, they found a portable scanner, forged documents, and the missing furnace component. They had brought evidence of nearly every crime back into the house with them. They built the trap themselves. I simply let them walk into it. The arrests were only the beginning. Vanessa spent the first night in county jail. Rick was held without immediate release because investigators discovered he had used false identities in 2 previous business loan applications. Their attorney initially claimed they had entered our home to care for it while we were away. That story failed when police presented the hospital records, the furnace video, the stolen property, and the recording of Vanessa lying about Emily being in the shower. Then Rick turned on Vanessa. He told investigators the loan scheme had been her idea. Vanessa responded by providing messages showing Rick had researched home equity fraud for months. Each tried to save themselves by handing the police more evidence against the other. Within weeks, the full betrayal came into view. Rick's business owed more than $400,000. Vanessa had hidden the debt from everyone, including Emily. Their SUV was leased, their jewelry was financed, and most of their impressive lifestyle existed on credit cards. They had first planned to ask us for money. After I refused to discuss our home equity at Christmas, they decided to take it. Vanessa volunteered to care for Emily because the surgery gave her access to our house, our documents, and our phones. The kindness had been part of the plan from the beginning. The forged messages she showed Emily had been created with an imitation messaging application. She wanted my wife weak, isolated, and ashamed to contact anyone else. If the fraud was discovered later, she intended to claim that Emily had signed the papers while confused by medication. That knowledge hurt Emily more than the financial theft. Vanessa was the person who had held her hand at our wedding. She was Sophie's godmother. She had promised their dying father that the sisters would always protect each other. For several weeks, Emily blamed herself. I reminded her that trust is not stupidity. The guilt belongs to the person who abuses trust, not the person brave enough to offer it. Our legal case lasted almost a year. I will not pretend it was easy. There were interviews, hearings, bills, sleepless nights, and moments when Emily wanted to move far away and forget everything. But she did not hide. At the sentencing hearing, Emily stood before the court and faced her sister. She spoke calmly. "You did not leave me without food because you forgot," she said. "You took the food with you. You did not leave my baby cold because the furnace failed. Your husband disabled it while you watched. You did not borrow our papers. You copied them to steal our home. I survived, but survival does not erase what you chose to do." Vanessa cried, but Emily did not. The court considered the financial fraud, identity theft, burglary, property damage, theft, and reckless endangerment. Rick received a prison sentence longer than Vanessa's because of his previous fraud and his direct role in disabling the furnace. Vanessa also received prison time, followed by probation and an order prohibiting her from contacting us. They were ordered to pay restitution. Most of the money would probably never be recovered, but that was no longer the point. The pending transfer had been stopped. The large loan never funded. Our home remained ours. Rick lost his business. Their SUV was repossessed. Their rented house was emptied. The photographs Vanessa had posted to make strangers envy her disappeared from social media one by one. Some relatives accused us of destroying the family by cooperating with the police. I gave every one of them the same answer. A police report did not destroy this family. The people who left a mother and baby to freeze destroyed it. Amos never raised the subject again. 1 year after that terrible night, we celebrated New Year's Eve at home. The repaired furnace hummed quietly. The refrigerator was full. Sophie, now 18 months old, wore red pajamas and chased wrapping paper across the living room floor. Emily had recovered physically, though a thin scar remained near her waist. She said she did not hate the scar. It reminded her that she had crawled across a freezing floor, protected our child, and stayed conscious until help arrived. At 11:59, I held Sophie while Emily stood beside me. We watched the final seconds of the year appear on television. 10, 9, 8. I remembered the dark house, the empty refrigerator, and the fear in Emily's eyes. 7, 6, 5. I remembered Vanessa asking how Indianapolis was while my wife listened from a hospital bed. 4, 3, 2, 1. Fireworks lit the sky outside. Sophie clapped without understanding why, and Emily rested her head against my shoulder. We did not celebrate revenge that night. Revenge had been watching Vanessa and Rick lose the life they tried to build with our suffering. What we celebrated was something better. We celebrated safety. We celebrated truth. We celebrated the fact that our daughter would grow up knowing that family is defined by protection, not by blood. I once thought justice would feel like anger finally winning. It did not. Justice felt like a warm house, a sleeping child, and a door that the right people could no longer open. And when midnight came, I understood the lesson I will carry for the rest of my life. They tried to steal our future in the cold, but the only thing they truly took was their place in it.